G'day fans and welcome back to another exciting episode of DNA Reviews as we give the old Docky Who a massive once-over, and this episode is blowing people's minds. And I'll tell you what, Aaron's sitting right there. He's had more than his mind blown. Is that right there, Mr. Aaron?
I don't know what you're insinuating, Dags, but I've hardly had any time to do work the last 3 days because everybody wants to talk about this episode of Doctor Who. What's going on? What did we just see? What's happening next? It's actually quite exciting and really rewarding for me to actually have an episode of Doctor Who which is sort of universally loved.
About friggin' time is probably the response to that. So there you go. So guess what, fans? Normally we try to keep the show to an hour. That is clearly not going to happen. Aaron sent through 10 billion different pictures. Which is a very, very groovy. So in case you haven't figured it out, we are talking about the old Docky Who. And for those, just as a complete aside, if you ever wanted to Google Docky Who, yes, it does actually pop up in Google now, which is kind of groovy, thanks to a video that our good mate Rusky Bays created. I do like that one, though. Do you mean this who, that who, Donkey Who? Who would Donkey Who be, dude?
It's one of It's like a time-traveling monkey from the Donkey Kong universe.
It could be. So there you go. Greg's with us, and of course that video was for him. So yes, there's very, very exciting stuff, and even Colin's joined us, which is a very, very cool. So yes, we're going to get straight into it because there's so much to cover off on this one. And of course, it is the Legend of Ruby Sunday. And I have to say, before I get any further, of course, there will be spoilers for those who don't know. And I assume that's the original Sutek head. Is that right? From the original blah, blah, blah episode from way back when?
It is indeed, yes.
Yeah, cool. So with this particular episode, I ended up doing something I have not done with the rest of the season. I ended up watching this episode twice. And I watched the second time today, and I got to admit, I really got a lot more out of it because there was just so much to take on board. I don't know. I mean, you would have watched it more than 3 times, surely, because there's just so much going on.
I've watched it about 6 times, and even then, only then did some of the dialogue I pick up on. So there is a bit we're going to go over because I think it leads into next week, and I think it also enhances the enjoyment of this episode too. After watching it a few times, I actually enjoy it more than when I saw it the first time, and I really liked it on the first watch. So it's a good episode.
Yeah, and for those, it was kind of funny because I was in the store on Saturday. Aaron was upstairs watching the episode, and one of our customers came in who's a big Docky Who fan, loves talking to you. And I started talking to him about Docky Who, and I thought, oh my God, what have you done to me, dude? You've corrupted my brain. I'm now on conversing with this dude. Now, Nickel doesn't join us live, but he'll be listening to the replay of this. And it's like, what's wrong with me? I'm talking about this stuff like I'm really invested in it. It's like, oh my God, you guys are killing me. So,
and you hadn't even seen the episode at the time.
No, at that point I hadn't. And as always, fans, we are going to be doing this, the good, bad, and the ugly. And it doesn't take much to work out. There's a fair few goods to get through regarding this. I'm going to let you drive this one because there's so much to cover off. And I guess the first thing that you've listed as a good is the intro.
It was the intro. And this is a real banger of an intro because we've had the intros are good before, but I think in this episode I've got 3 or 4 goods before even the opening title sequence. The TARDIS landing is something a bit special. We've been talking about how the TARDIS might be malfunctioning or changing over this whole season, but it's never landed like this before, where it causes a sonic boom in the sky, comes down, skids into place, and turns round to the classic police box. So a very iconic landing for something that's never ever really happened before.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of funny. There'll be purists out there going, no, it's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to just appear on the spot, right? But visually, it really worked. And of course, the damage, because it's scratched on the what do you call it, the landing platform, it would have made some damage there. But it was very effective, very evocative of just saying, yes, I've arrived. And of course, the doctor pops out and there he is. And I've got to say, I thought that was actually really, really impressive. And it's almost like the unit tower was a bit like Stark's tower from the MCU. It's just this big open platform that something can just fly in. And yeah, I totally agree with you. I thought, what a way to kickstart the episode. So yeah, very
And
good.
just as a little bit of extra, they released a behind the scenes on filming of that. And it's one of those things where the work of movie magic really works on screen, because behind the scenes, to keep everyone's eye line at the same place as the TARDIS is coming in, they just roll a tennis ball down the middle of the thing and say, keep an eye on the ball. So it's basically, here comes the TARDIS, roll the tennis ball, and they'll go like in line with the tennis ball. So I think that's a funny little thing to show behind the scenes.
And then you'll have extras who'll be looking at the floor of the tennis ball. No, you look up from the tennis ball. Don't look down at the tennis ball. But yeah, it is kind of funny how these things work. And of course, in the show, it looked really, really good. And then, of course, the docky does actually pop his nose out, which is kind of groovy.
It does. And do you know what I really like? I really like when the show actually starts addressing questions that have been through the whole series. And it's one of those good episodes where we start getting answers. And I don't know if you thought this, but the trailer for last week really, got us looking down the wrong direction, because we saw Susan Triad as these different aliens and we were thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be her true form. No, it's just adventures we didn't see, and it's different forms of her that have turned up in the Doctor's adventures. So those little tiny cameos of her as aliens were just tiny cameos and had nothing to do. And I think that's classic misdirection, where for a whole week people were like going, oh, she's this demon or something, and no, it was just a throwaway that we dealt with before the opening titles even started.
Yeah, I don't watch the trailers at the end of the episodes. I don't want to know what's coming up. I'd rather just remain ignorant. So I switched it off. So I didn't even watch that. But yeah, at least, I mean, we've been discussing throughout the entire season how this woman keeps appearing. We've all noticed it as the audience. The characters have started to notice it. And now they've really made a big deal of it, saying, yeah, she is here, there, and everywhere. And so, okay, finally, we're addressing this particular story, this particular subplot that's been going on through the entire episode, the entire series. And the fact that she's like a massive, big power broker, like almost like a pseudo politician person, was particularly groovy. So, Susan Triad, with the name Triad, to go, yeah, clearly there's something in that. And of course, that brings up where you sort of rearrange the words and you get the TARDIS. And even I didn't put two and two together on that one, but I like the fact that all the characters had already figured that part out. So I thought that was very groovy.
Well, what I thought was really amazing about this, on the forums for this whole series, because it has been known she was Susan Triad, there's been all these fans that kind of go, well, I'm super clever because I've worked out it's an anagram of TARDIS. And of course, a fan internet site is nowhere near as informed as a paramilitary unit. And of course, everyone there was like, yeah, well, TARDIS, that was pretty damn obvious all along, wasn't it? And I think that's almost mocking fandom and conspiracy theories and stuff like that. Just by the way, they're like, well, we noticed that straight away, Doctor. Like what are you going on about?
Yeah, that was actually really good, because typically you're right. The hero says, this is what it is. And everybody goes, oh, we didn't know that. And in this case, they already did know that. And that was really left field and different. They'd already had it long since worked out. It's almost like saying, Doctor, you're a complete knob. We had that done ages ago. That was actually a nice touch. It's almost like saying, this is the typical cliche. We're just going to turn it on its head. And it was very effective. And I felt that to be the case in a few times this episode. And that was actually really, really groovy. I like the idea that we're back with Unit. We're back with the lady. I've forgotten her name, who's in charge of Unit, the Lethbridge Stewart woman. And it seemed like one big happy family. And I thought that was actually really, really groovy. So the question I've got to ask you, and I guess this is being brought up in the show regarding Susan and whether she's the granddaughter. In your opinion, I can't remember if it's addressed in the episode or not. Is it a yes or a no? We're going to cover that off later.
I don't know. We'll talk about it later more in sort of, I guess, the speculation of what's coming. I did think it was probably a red herring because of what happens down the track, but I did think this is really good. We get all this information, and then, this has been in the whole series. So if you've watched it all carefully, it's all been ticked off about his granddaughter, Susan, and Kate's like, is this significant? And it's like the name of my granddaughter. And then the episode starts. So there was like 3 or 4 major good things for the first 3 minutes before we're into the episode. And I think that's a real good way to start an episode.
Because I think what really worked is that when we had something like the Discord thing, the Beatles thing from episodes ago, when they're in London in 1963, and I think he said his granddaughter lives just over there. And I think it's meant to be this granddaughter, Susan. And I thought that's a nice link between there and here. I reckon that was kind of groovy. So they dropped this mention back there, and they're reaffirming it here. And what really worked is the fact that, of course, that we know that the Doctor changes appearances throughout his regenerations, but of course Ruby wouldn't know that. And I did
No.
like the idea that she had to be given a bit of with a Time Lord 101 sort of like education really quickly as to who he was.
Yeah, and through the dialogue there, I'm not going to read it all. I think this is interesting because it keeps the audience up to date, but it also emphasizes something that I think is going to be addressed a little bit later in the episode. I could be wrong, but we'll see where it goes. But I did like how Kate and a couple of the other people gave the Doctor what you haven't told Ruby you're going to change, or you can change kind of look, and she's sort of looking around going, what why are you all looking at me like I should know this kind of thing? So I thought that was interesting.
So, go on.
The other thing there's one line of dialogue that I think is really important. So if we just put that slide back up, the Doctor regenerates when he's actually been physically almost killed, so he saves his life. The last one there, or sometimes when we hide ourselves away. And the Doctor has done that once. The second Doctor didn't regenerate because he had anything bad happen to him. The second Doctor regenerated because the Time Lords made him regenerate and hid him away on Earth as an exile on Earth. And I thought, everyone forgets that. That's a really interesting line. And there's another line coming up later in the episode that echoes that might come back. That could have been Mr. Chekhov and his gun right there.
What I found interesting is that he actually says, the Doctor, I'm staying this way for a long time. You can, if you're interpreting that in many different ways, you could say, does that mean that Shooty's going to be sticking around for 101 years as the Doctor? So, yeah, there you go. Because if he does end up changing for whatever reason, regenerating, if the actor leaves the show and they've got to regenerate, it'd be curious to see how they tackle the one, because he clearly thinks he's staying as he is for a while. Question for me. Spanking has asked, the question for me is Docky Who growing on me, or do you like it more as you were not a big fan before? No. This episode I really enjoyed, but when this series finishes next week, I'm not going to be shedding any tears. So there's been a few too many downs, not enough ups. And you watch an episode like this and you go, well, why did we have rubbish like Rogue and Space Babies? Why couldn't it all been this good quality the whole way through for freaking 8 episodes? And Adza said, still finding Disney Who splaining. I guess that's true, but they did it much better this time around. And you got to look at it from Ruby's perspective. She's never known the Doctor to look like anything else except like Shooty. So he would have to be a bit of re-education. And of course, even if you say to someone, oh, yeah, I change appearances and whatever else, until you actually physically see it, you really wouldn't get it in your head. So, all good stuff.
I totally agree with Adam there. And when we get to the bads, one of the things I thought was bad with this episode, there was a lot of plot exposition because there was so much happening. They needed characters talking about what was happening all the time. But we will get back to that later.
Yep, sticking with the goods.
Melanie's back. It's interesting because from the original run of Doctor Who, Bonnie Langford as Mel was one of my least favourite companions. And what's happened with her coming back, they've kind of made the character 100 times better than she seemed to me originally. And I did think at the same time, you introduce her, she's doing stuff. So she's working for UNIT. You go right into the middle of what she's doing. And I did think the twist was Susan Triad turns out she's a really nice person. So they've gone in to investigate her. And she is nice. The other thing about Mel, which we'll come up with later, they could have chose any companion to really come back. She's one of the few companions from Classic Who you don't know anything about her background. She just turned up and she just disappeared. And so I do think, maybe Russell T Davies is going to fill some of that in as well.
Yeah, it was a shame you didn't have a picture from her from the original series, because I didn't know who she was. But I thought, and you've discussed this before, if you don't know the backstory of something, sometimes you go, all right, there's a bit of history there. I don't know what it is. But I know in this case, there was some history there, and you would know what it was, but I had no idea. So I thought, that's cool, but it would have been cute to see, or interesting to see what she looked like, or where she appeared, or when she appeared. So just quickly, when was her time on the show? 90s,
she
2000s,
was with
80s?
She was with Colin Baker in about 1986 during the sort of Trial of a Time Lord era and the beginning of Sylvester McCoy. She wasn't ever a fan favourite, so it's interesting that they did bring her back. She's probably one of the actresses from Doctor Who that's gone on to a lot of stuff. In England, she's been on EastEnders and she's done a lot of plays and a singer and stuff like that. So maybe that's why they brought her back as well.
And just quickly, yes or no, it was the same actress, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, very, very cool. What I did like is, the usual thing is, okay, the Susan Triad lady, there's some shifty stuff going on there, and they're trying to find out what the problem is, and it turns out there's nothing wrong with her whatsoever. That's also another change from the usual cliche saying, "Oh, the evil person's lurking behind the good person. We just got to claw it out." And of course, that's not the case at all. And I really like that. So they're sort of scratching their heads, and effectively they're heading off in the wrong direction, trying to find a problem where there is no problem. So that was actually very, very good. And once again, that was another part that I really liked. And the actress or the character, as Susan tried, you go, you know what? She does come across as a really nice person. And I thought that was actually really well done. So very good.
Yep, and the other thing, and this is another good, where the doctor's at unit and he's got like the ability to use all of their technology. So he says, "Oh, there's another mystery woman in the room. We're going to look at Ruby's mystery as well," which I thought was really good because usually stuff like that is spoken about in episodes and then is kind of forgotten. But in this one, the doctor's being proactive because he's got the ability to. So even Ruby was surprised when he like brought up all her Facebook pictures or whatever, and then they had the history. And UNIT have said they've been watching her too because of the goblin incursion that happened when she was a baby. So they've got background on her as well. So I did think everything in this episode kept propelling the episode forward with layering on more mystery and more information and actually promising answers to some of the stuff we've been scratching our heads for all season.
Yep, totally agree with you. I like this one from Madsy. Maybe she's only there as in the Mel lady because she was the only one available. All the other actresses said, no, not interested. Colin made a point about saying that how Ruby could have been told about the doctor's ability to regenerate. I disagree. In the end, it's like, until it actually happens, it's the kind of thing you wouldn't even be thinking about it. You know, it's like one of those things, oh, I didn't think to mention it because it's not a big deal. So I totally get that. I enjoyed the line explaining UNIT is automatically distrusting of anyone giving away free tech since it's been a bad guy plan staple for many past doctors. In fact, in real life, if that was to occur here, there'd be a lot of like questions going on. What's the motivation for doing it? So I can kind of get it.
The evil of U2 having their album on every single like electronic device ever for free.
Mate, you watch next week. Bono's taken over the world. And he spoke about Ruby because they're probably all linked together. Exactly right. Look, it worked really well, and it is good to have a familiar character come back. And for someone like you, it must have been like, oh my God, that's completely left field. Good on her for doing it. One thing's for sure, UNIT is one big happy family. A family unit, get it? And I reckon that was kind of cool. Except for all this sort of stuff that's going on CCTV on a videotape, mate. How good's that?
Oh, I know. And one of the things there that this is actually something Shane brought up. I would never have thought of it. They said the tape is the CCTV is 66 meters away. 66, order 66. But
no, I was thinking, hang on. I'm going to 73 yards.
It is. It's 72 points. So that's something. Yeah, that's something. It came up. 66 is 72.91, but you know what? 66.6, the number of the beast, is about 73 yards. And I don't know if they did that on purpose, but I'd be pretty surprised if they did. And the great thing about this as well, they've got the footage, and Ruby's got it on a videotape when they say, does the tape still exist? Which I think is very cool as well.
So the things that I took from this, right? Yeah, you are right. I didn't realize you had the picture there. 66 meters, 73 yards. It's kind of funny. They mentioned meters in this, but in 73 yards, it was in yards. They're using two totally different like methodologies of distance. I'm not entirely sure. As you're regarding all your 666s, it could have been 667, which of course is the neighbor of the beast. I thought I'd just chuck that in. And with the videotape, I was thinking, because the thing is, I don't know about you, right? But they're talking about Christmas Eve 2004. Now, that's only like 3 weeks ago as far as the world's concerned. And videotape was still common at that point because I remember they were still releasing videos in 2005.
Hold on. You've lost 20 years. It's 2024 now. They're talking about 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's what I said. Is that what I said?
2004 is 20 years ago.
Yeah, no, that's what I said. But to me, it seems like when they say, oh, it's 2004, you go, mate, that was only like 3 weeks back as far as we're concerned. When we hear 20 years ago, we think 1980 something, 1970 something. So 2004 just seems like really recent. So because they had it on. Go on.
I thought about that because I was like, were we still using videotape in 2004? Yes. And it was, yeah.
Yes. It was just before the era of the whole big like digital TV revolution and the streaming hadn't come in and blah, blah, blah. So, yes, because I remember videotapes being released in 2005. But it's just so funny when they go, 20 years ago, it was so archaic. And you go, not really. It was only 2004. It's not that far back. So it's just perspective. Young people would go, 20 years ago, no, that's 100 years back for us. I'm thinking, as I said, back in the 80s. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It is on video. Now, how they got it on video, and they kept calling it VHS. They never
Yeah.
mentioned it as video. I don't know why that was the case. They're clearly saying it's not on beta tape. So,
Yeah,
I thought that was
well, it was on video, and I did think it was cool that she had the one video under her bed in a shoebox. But I think even the videotape is evocative to Doctor Who fans and sci-fi fans in general,
yes.
because we were the ones that used to tape everything and keep everything. You've got to remember, most people had about 5 tapes that they would just record over and over and over, but it was just the Doctor Who fans that kept everything forever. Not just Doctor Who fans, sci-fi fans that would keep all of the Star Trek or all of their favorite series. So I thought that was just a nice nod to fandom.
It'd be probably the only videotape that Ruby's ever seen in her life, because by the time she was a teenager, video was long gone. So it'd be kind of funny if she said, "We've got a videotape, but we don't have a video player or anything to plug it in. We can't watch it on anything. VCRs, what's that in 2024 technology?" So I thought that was quite funny. But yes, they had a video. Why there was a CCTV camera pointing at the church or just off to the church, anybody's guess. But it worked. Now, this I did not see coming. I don't know if you did or not.
Well, this was interesting because Mrs. Flood, I think you've watched the first one where she was in. She addressed, she was one of the characters that's actually looked at the camera and addressed the audience. And in that, she said, "What, you think I've never seen a TARDIS before?" So obviously she was going to be an interesting character that was in development. But this was quite weird. And they call in Mrs. Flood and they're getting her to look after Ruby's grandma. And this is the line, Dags: "I'm always hiding myself away. The doctor said, and sometimes Time Lords regenerate to hide themselves away."
Okay. Interesting.
So maybe she's a Time Lord. And do you know what causes a flood?
Lots of rain and water and snow if it melts.
So rain. What is rain an anagram of? Rani.
Oh my god, nerd! I'm thinking Nair or something.
No, every one of the jokes with Doctor Who fans is every year they say the Rani's coming back, because the Rani is an evil Time Lord like the Master, just not high up on the ladder of characters. But I would not put it past Russell T Davies to have that joke and go, flood, rain, the Rani, and that's why she's there or something.
I was going to say the joke is Doctor Who fans, but anyway, I thought it was great. I mean, you are right. I forgot about the Christmas thing when she says, "Yeah, I don't think I've seen a TARDIS before," and she's taken over looking after the grandmother, and all of a sudden it's like, "Oi, where's this going?" You know, all the things that you want to get, you're not going to get. And I love the line, right? I absolutely laughed my head off when she said, "Are you still hoping for that growth spurt?" which you've got written there. I reckon that was an absolute
well,
a ripper.
It is funny because, like, she was giving out the backhanded compliments, and I do find there's a certain sort of, my mum, it reminds me of my mum, British women that talk like that, where, you know, and I did think it was funny when Rose, Donna's daughter, was in this. It was so obvious, like, she was so much taller than everyone. When she was hugging everyone at the start, even the doctor was about, 6 inches shorter than her. So when she's actually standing next to Ruby like that, you can see. And then that growth spurt line was great. But that whole thing you were saying, when she's saying, "Yeah, you'd like a lot of things, wouldn't you? But they aren't going to happen," and she just changed straight away. So there's obviously something with this character that's going to be revealed either this week or it's going to develop in the future for sure.
I thought it was great because when she walks into the room and the old lady says, "Can I get a cup of tea?" and then Mrs. Flood or whatever it is just says no, and all of a sudden the dark clouds are coming and go, "Hey, hang on, that's just come out of completely left field." And if it turns out it is the Rani character and you figured it out by mixing around with all the letters, yeah, score one for you, dude. I mean, that's actually very, very impressive. So, but that, yeah, it was completely left unresolved. So who knows where that's going? So very, very cool. So we get back to Unit, and of course they got their time portal thing or whatever it's called. And I did like the line when they make a mention about saying it. "You told us in the 1970s not to do it." I reckon that was that was really, really clever.
Yeah, it is one of those things where there was an episode in the 70s called The Time Monster, where they got these chronoton crystals and that it was all about time travel, and that was the god of time. And I did wonder if they were going to be doing something that summoned back the god of time, because that'd be pretty powerful too. The other thing there, the picture on the bottom is their time window chamber. The picture on the top is actually a Star Trek holodeck. So I think like there's a bit of a nod towards the holodeck there. They've got basically a time holodeck.
Yeah, I kind of worked that out as well as being the case. But it was very groovy. They get the tape and they sort of accentuate all the information that comes from it. And it was a really good sequence, actually. And it was like it was really tense and there was a lot going on. So, yeah.
Well, it kind of reminded me of the scene from Blade Runner where they have the one picture and then they go in and examine the picture. Now, here's something interesting I don't think anyone else has picked up on. As soon as I saw that picture of the TV that's next to the good, it reminded me of a movie straight away. And the movie is The Ring. So the TV in the middle is the TV from Doctor Who, and the TV on the right is the same monitor and the same picture from The Ring. And the picture underneath that has the same sort of woman from 73, even with the same tree blowing sideways, but that's from the movie The Ring. So that's not from Doctor Who.
Well, so as they say, is it a homage or a rip-off? That's the...
Well, I am wondering, there is a lot of stuff in this season that I think is not pinched, but as you might say, homages from other movies. And I'm probably just seeing patterns that aren't there. But maybe that'll come back into it with the canon rupturing. But I did think this was a really well done scene, and something that I don't think we've ever seen in Doctor Who before, recreating a time in a time window and investigating what's happening in that period.
What I did like, yeah, and I really like this, where they said, you've got a time machine, go back to the time and sort it out. And the doctor specifically says, I can't go back to where I've been before. And I really picked up on it today, and I thought, of course, that would make sense, because realistically, if you've been there before, you'll appear and there'll suddenly be two TARDISes and two doctors, and it gets all confusing. So he said he can't go back there because he's been there already. It's almost like a written rule, don't go back to where you've just been. I thought that was actually quite impressive. That was a real get out of jail free card, because in the writer's room, he'd be going, well, why don't you just go back and fix it all? And then they've said, but he can't, because then he'll meet himself. And I was really dialed into that. I thought that was a really good explanation as to why he couldn't just return back to 2004 on Christmas Eve. So, yeah.
They have had in Doctor Who before, it's kind of an unwritten rule that there are fixed points in time. And if the Doctor has been there and seen an event and he isn't there, he can't go back again, because it actually changes everything the first time round. So the only time that rule is kind of broken is when they have a multi-doctor special, and it's always the Doctor is taken out of one timeline and put into another. It's never like going through his own history and going back into it kind of thing. So they have tried to be quite clever about that.
Yeah, I thought that was actually quite good. I was really rapt to hear that. So yeah, very cool.
So here's something I absolutely loved, and I don't know if it was deliberate and I'm the only one who picked up on it, but when they turned the time window on, there was this fantastic scene where it went from the black room with the white squares, and there was all these like shining lights and different shapes and stuff before the picture came. And I am sure that they mixed different Doctor Who opening title sequences into that moment where it's transitioning. So if you look at the picture in the very center, that's the Doctor and Ruby as all this light and stuff goes around them. And then they've shown a couple of other frames either side of that. And then underneath it, I've found frames where I think they've actually taken elements or made it look like previous Doctor Who opening title sequence, which I thought was really cool. I might just be, again, seeing patterns in things that aren't there.
So did you interpret anything from the fact that it started snowing even before they turned the machine on yet?
Yeah, it's obvious that, I think when Ruby gets totally emotional, she snows. There's going to be, it snows. I think it's going to be something to do with multiple TARDISes there, because we do find there was more than one TARDIS there, it seems, or something has ruptured the timelines around Ruby or something. I think that will definitely be something that is solved next week. Like, there's some crazy theories at the end of this that I'll go into. They're not going to be real, but they're just so many things happening that I'm just like, is this really coincidence that they've put all this stuff in? But anyway, yeah.
Now, I didn't watch the end credits. Was there a trailer for next week or not? Yes or no?
No, there
cool.
wasn't.
That's all I need to know. All right, cool. So they're in the. I found this to be riveting television. I really dialed into this. This is actually when they're in the room, they're looking at the thing, and they're trying to see the woman, and it was really intense stuff. Everybody's trying to see who is this person, who's the mother, and I thought this was actually really, really good. And of course, the Doctor gets to see himself and the TARDIS appearing from 2004, and I thought, yeah, well done to them. This was a really well done sequence.
Yeah, this was an amazing sequence, and it is one of those things, again, not just in Doctor Who. I don't really think I've seen anything like this in any show. I mean, I haven't watched everything ever, but there could be. But the whole thing where they're talking about, it looks like she's overlaid, so she's glitching, and there's multiple images, and the Doctor says his memory has changed, and it keeps changing of this, which kind of makes me think there are multiple TARDISes there, which is making his memory change of what he remembers. I did find it was interesting. The guy who was in the simulation couldn't see her face even when he was moving around, yet Ruby's mum, who was outside, said, I can see her, she's crying.
I think it was more of a body language thing. When a person cries, especially if they're upset, the human body moves in certain ways, right? And I think she's just interpreting the body movement to say that she's actually crying. I was going to say something I completely forgot. Oh yeah, I like the idea that when they had to stand in the one spot and they couldn't move, they were stuck there because they didn't want to interfere in what was going on. I thought that was very clever. And Ruby, her performance was really good in this because she's seeing her mother but can't see her mother. And the fact that the mother skipped from this point to that point just as they were going past, it was really good. It was really like, what's going on sort of stuff. It was excellently done. So yeah, very, very
I
cool.
did think Millie Gibson's performance has been uniformly good through the whole season. She's been a standout of this season to me. And I do much like the Doctor when he's being serious and not joking around. And it was much better in this episode, I thought.
Well, he's being challenged, right, in this episode, far more than previous episodes, like really hardcore challenge. And his brain has got, I can't figure stuff out. I don't have the answers. He's been pummeled with all these questions and he doesn't know the answers. And that's good. That's good quality characterization because he shouldn't be able to just fluff his way through it, so to speak. So, and he's being tested. And I reckon that was, it's really good for him. So, yeah, very, very cool.
Yeah, and then I did think it was good. Ruby and the Doctor are having a moment, and all of a sudden, the simulation has kind of ended, and they've seen what they want, and they have to interrupt them and say, "What is this?" Because after the Doctor left and no one knew what was happening, something appeared, and it almost was like the Dementors from Harry Potter, the kind of effect where you've got this sort of shadow or a cloud of particles with something inside it. But this is obviously something that hasn't been revealed yet, and they give us a couple of red herrings as to what it could be. Again, just when you think the scene has ended and the tension has kind of let up, they upped it again, which I thought was really good.
Yeah, and I knew once the guy went behind the TARDIS, he was a goner. So that was a bit of a no-brainer. Greg has asked, everyone is assuming it's Ruby's mother. Do we know for sure that the woman is her mum? The answer would be, it would be 50-50. So just because the woman dropped her off at the doorstep doesn't mean that she was the parent. But that's what they're all implying at this stage. So she doesn't have to be, no. So you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. You don't know it's her mum, but that's what they're obviously implying with everything. I guess it is just the woman that dropped her off. It could be anyone.
Yeah, it could be the Uber Eats driver or something like that. All right, so we go back to Susan Triad, right? And of course, Susan's got a big speech, and of course, then she starts to spill the beans. And I like the fact that when she gets introduced to the Doctor, she just says Doctor Who, and I thought someone had to say it at some point. That was very cool. But she has the dreams about all the previous episodes that we've seen her in. That was very groovy, actually. So yeah.
Yeah, one of the weirdest lines in Doctor Who ever. Do you dream about being an ambulance? But I just thought that was funny. But what I really did like, when you get these big bosses that are surrounded by cronies, often people can't get close, or they dismiss them, or they don't want to talk. And she was amiable and nice to the Doctor, kind of reinforcing what Mel had said, where, do you know what? She's a really nice person.
I like the fact that when he said to her, "Have we met before?" and she said, "I would recognize or remember a handsome chap like you." I thought that was a very good line because, I mean, all things being equal, Shooty is a good-looking bloke, right? And I just thought that was really good. And of course, there was no overtones associated with it. It was just it was a complimentary line, And I thought, yeah, good on her for that. So, but the fact that she started to crack and then started saying, "Oh, yeah, I can't sleep well. I'm having bad dreams," I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah.
Question here: do you think the mother could be someone from the Doctor's past?
I think it probably will be. I think it'll be someone who's known, because you can't have a mystery person and then build it up. And when you reveal who it is, it's no one ever anyone's met before. So I think it'll be from the Doctor's past, or it'll be someone in this series that we don't know who it is. I am now leaning toward Mrs. Flood, actually.
Yeah.
And she's been living next door to Ruby because she's wanted to see her grow up.
Oh, I was going to say, wouldn't it be funny if it was Mrs. Flood who dropped Ruby off at the church, but that kind of probably doesn't work. But yeah, she's there for a reason, and there's more to be told,
Yes.
as you mentioned earlier. They got the whole thing about the TARDIS making noises. It's been brought up before. You've brought it up before. And when it groaned, I mean, I had it on the speakers up pretty loud here, and it was like, yeah, that was a groan and a half. It was not a happy camper. So there you go.
So we have speculated just about every other episode that there's something wrong with the TARDIS and that groaning isn't normal. And I do like that as sort of a checkbox. They've been actually revealing some of the stuff from previous episodes that wasn't really important to the plot in those episodes, but it has been building up over the whole series. And so that was a big positive for me, that they're addressing the issue of the TARDIS malfunctioning and groaning and stuff.
I also like the fact that everybody in unit obeys orders. When someone says evacuate the room, they're gone, right? I like it. And like the soldiers, they want to move, and the lady in charge has just said, stand where you are, and they just do as they're told. That's cool, right? The respect for leadership, the chain of command, loved it. And unit, you look at unit, and you go, you know what, that would be a cool place to hang out in, because everybody is there for the same purpose, and no one's got their own agendas and whatever else. I think, and that was kind of cool. This one was interesting. Harriet was I forgot her name. Harriet, I think it was Harbinger. As if you could have put that one together pretty damn quickly if you had read her CV. H. Harbinger.
Well, it was Harriet Harbinger.
Harriet.
Like what we saw in the Devil's Cord. The god has a harbinger that unleashes them before they arrive. So what I did think was cool in the Devil's Cord, you saw the little kid he survived at the end and disappeared. And you do wonder if this is the same character or it's a different harbinger for a different god. But again, really nice. They set up that was the pattern in the second episode of the series, and in the second last episode, they come back. Now, this is one of those conversations I didn't really pick up on until the third or fourth time of reading it. But whoever the god is, he was hidden in the howling void, and he whispered to the vessel, which is the TARDIS. He whispered to the vessel. All this time, he whispered and delighted and seduced, and the vessel did obey. So basically, the god has taken over the TARDIS.
To what ends? Why?
Well, I think to manifest him back in reality.
Oh, okay. So well, it did occur in the flashback sequence where the TARDIS was there and the Sutek appeared, and of course in the control room as well. So maybe you are right. The TARDIS is the link between everything. Well, so yeah, go on.
So, and then we have, which I thought was really cool, where the Doctor's like, we weren't looking at the right word play. It was the TARDIS word play was the trap, but the Su Triad or Su technology, Su Tech, and it reveals it is Su Tech. And for any real fans who have watched the series, not real fans, but long-term fans, I guess, who've watched the series would have known straight away, because they actually got the guy who played Su Tech in the 70s to come back. And when you started hearing the voice whispering to her what she should be saying in her speech, I was like, oh, the game's up at Su Tech. That's the same guy doing the voice. So I thought that was incredibly good as well. But it is a good reveal for something they kept really secret. It was speculated by people. I think we might have even brought it up. It might be Su Tech. But it really wasn't known until this. And as a classic fan who Pyramids of Mars is one of my favorite stories, this whole sequence gave me goosebumps. I thought this was amazing.
Yeah, we can understand why they wouldn't have figured it out, because there's no K in Susan Triad. So they would have had to have been. I mean, I like the Su Tech down the bottom. That kind of works, right? But you've got to cut the guy some slack, because if they're mixing all the words together and they're missing a letter, they go, well, it can't be that. But I like the idea
of Dags, just explain something.
What's that,
Sutek is the god of death. He is not the god of good spelling.
Dude, even the god of death has spell checker on his freaking iPhone or something. So, but I reckon they would have said, but it doesn't work. There's no K. Don't worry about it. Shut the K in. It's all good. But I like the idea of the suit as in TECH. I think that was kind of cool. And yeah, that was like, okay, that has just come out of absolute nowhere. And you are right. All this time we're all thinking this way and goes that way instead, which is a very, very, very cool. What's to say? This is an anagram. This was not. Yeah, exactly right. And yeah, so this is actually the last of our goods, funnily enough. So the god of death. How about this, mate?
And I did think this was one of the best endings of the season, which is why I've got the to be continued there, because Sutek is the god of death, and by his hand all creation shall fall and into dust and ash and ruin, and then it ends. And I mean, you've got, from space babies, which is not going to scare anyone, to like a freaking zombie that turns people into dust by touching them, reaching out towards the screen as the episode ends with like announcing that. That's a freaking good ending to an episode.
Yep, totally agree. Once again, moving like 10 letters and adding a new letter isn't an anagram. It's totally true. And unit may not necessarily have known about Sutek. I don't know. Is that true, dude?
Well, the original Pyramids of Mars was set in an old priory house that Sutek built on top of. Presumably, they might have found some of the stuff in the basement. You honestly don't know on that one. From the TV canon, anyway, you don't know.
Yep, no, very good. Well, guess what, fans? That was the end of the goods. Now we get to go to the bads. And you might be thinking, surely there were no bads in this particular episode. But according to Aaron, there were. And we're about to kick them off right now. Go bad, son. Go bad or go home.
Okay, well, you seem to like this, the unit family. I actually thought there were too many characters in the episode. I thought you could have maybe not had Rose in there. She didn't really do anything for the whole episode. And I guess they had to have Harriet. She was a new unit member that has never been in unit before. But I did think when you've got the wide angles, when it starts at the start, the Doctor gets introduced to about 6 different people and introduces Ruby to about 6 different people. And there's nothing there that they couldn't have removed 2 characters and one of the other character didn't have the dialogue. I just thought it would have made it a bit simpler. On the other side of that, next episode, half of them might die. So that's why they might have extra characters in this. But I did think all the characters got a couple of lines, and I did think, do you know what? They could have just have one character say all of this and it would have maybe been more direct.
But Rose has been around before, hasn't she?
Rose has been in. She is Donna's daughter. See, this is the thing I don't get. I address this later. She's only meant to be 15 or 16, so I don't know why she's working at unit.
Okay, all right. So, where I was coming from is that when he's saying hello to all these people, admittedly, there's a couple there you go, who are these dudes, like the soldier guy and whatever else. I mean, it was a bit of a long bit. I totally agree with you on that one. What I think they were trying to establish is the fact that the Docky is actually well respected by everybody, even people who've never met him before. So, right, because you don't want him to say, oh, this is Mel and this is this person, we're all good friends. But Fred over there has no idea who you are. And he's got the shifty eyes going on. But I think it's the idea of saying he's friendly with everybody. But it was a long bit. I won't deny that. Now, it's funnily enough, when this came up, right, and I thought straight away, oh, I've seen this character before. And of course, you got this the 13-year-old kid. And I go, mate, that's Dr. Z from friggin' Galactica 980, which is.
Well, I was channeling that too, and this is the one I find this quite annoying. They introduced a new scientific advisor in the specials over Christmas, and she was Shirley, and they made a point she was in a wheelchair, and she was the first red-headed scientific advisor, and I thought her character was going to develop. And what apparently happened behind the scenes, this actor was one of the voices in Space Babies, and when he was doing the voices for the Space Babies, Russell T Davies saw him and said, "Do you know what? We've got to get you in the show. You're fantastic." So Shirley, who was meant to be in this episode, got sent to Geneva, and they replaced the scientific advisor. And I just thought, do you know what? I would like some continuity. The more a character is in an episode, in different episodes in a season, it has more weight if something happens to that character down the track. So if you have a different scientific advisor every freaking time they go to unit, and again, UNIT has the most diverse policy for recruiting people ever. I mean, in the 70s and 80s, it was, basically a military organization. Now UNIT looks, I don't know, more like, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with it. It just seems like it's been deliberately loaded that way just because of that's what's one of the things in society at the moment. So nothing wrong with the character, but just from a continuity point of view, I'd prefer the same character has a bit of a story arc before they start ripping one out and putting another one in and changing things around.
If they wanted to really push the envelope, they'd kill that dude off, right? He's like, oh my God, because he's effectively a 13-year-old kid and he gets knocked off. They won't do it, but it would be cool if they did. I did like the fact that when all the lights are flashing in the time room and they turned to him and said, well, should we shut it off? And he says, no way. That was good. Normally people go, no, turn it off. It's all going completely haywire. The engine's can't take it, Captain. And he's the exact opposite. Yeah. No, keep going. I actually thought he was all right. I had problems understanding some of the dialogue with the accent, but overall, I thought, it is wanky. He's a 13-year-old kid. He's like this biggest super genius, but it is Docky Who after all.
Well, I think was his name Morris Gibbons or
Morris Gibbons. Morris Gibbons. Yeah.
So obviously, I think he will be more likely to come back in the future if they've replaced a character to put him in. Like I said, didn't find anything wrong with the character, just the chopping and changing of the UNIT personnel, probably, continuity to have like the same person work for a while is what you want in an organization like that. So I'm stretching, basically I'm stretching for bads,
Yeah, righto. Well, here's another one for you. The old caterpillar doesn't know it's a butterfly. Well, who knows that? It might actually know. So no one's ever asked one before.
Well, there's two bads in this. If the Doctor and Ruby have been seeing this woman everywhere, right? And then they come back and everyone in UNIT knows who she is. If she's been on the cover of all these magazines and she's addressing the entire world and creating all this technology, would not Ruby know who she was? Even if she didn't, it would be like if you bumped into Elon Musk, even if you didn't follow him, you would know who he was. And she seems to be that level of famous, yet Ruby's going, oh, we saw her in the Space Babies and the ambulance. Wouldn't Ruby have been the one to turn to the Doctor after a couple of times of seeing her and go, gee, that looks like the genius Susan Triad who's going to revolutionize technology on Earth?
You're on the right track, but the difference is that Susan Triad did not appear on all the cover of TV Week and Woman's Day and Woman's Weekly. All the magazines, I'm being facetious, all the magazines that Ruby might have read. You are right. You would think that she would at least have heard the name, even if she didn't know what Susan looked like. That's a pretty fair point, actually. Once upon a time, there used to be these super genius people who, like Bill Gates. Everybody knew who Bill Gates was, but nobody knew what he looked like. Same with Steve Jobs. Now, of course, with the internet and blah, 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 it's pretty hard to remain anonymous. So fair call on that one. Unless, of course, Ruby's just so in her own world, doing her own thing as a teenager, because she's still only 19. I don't care about all that political stuff. So it is possible, but it would seem unlikely, I agree.
And the other thing that you were saying about, we've got a theory, maybe she's a chrysalis turned into a butterfly. Yeah, good way to give away the plot. I did think that was exposition just a bit too far, where they actually, okay, the Brigadier's smart, but yeah, that's actually what happened. So maybe I thought I wasn't actually thinking that. So when they said that, I was like, maybe if they hadn't have said that, the change at the end might have been even a bigger surprise. But I am reaching for bad stuff in this,
And he's not done yet, fans.
Well, this goes back to what I was talking about before. Why was Rose actually there? They actually say they never give me any proper work. They got me investigating shoplifting in Catford. She is like the work experience person, but she's got gold level security clearance that's higher than the Prime Minister.
I'll tell you, well, it's true. I found it funny. I misread the line when she said shoplifting in Catford. I thought she said, I've been investigating shoplifting of cat food. So in other words, someone's stealing cat food from a shop and she's investigating. I go, she's doing what? Someone's stealing cat food. And then when I watched it the second time, I go, oh, hang on, it sounds like it's a place rather than a product. But yeah, look, I don't know. But there must be, logically, there would be a reason, and we don't know yet what that is. Currently, you are right, Rose is somewhat underutilized. And if she's only supposed to be a teenager, the actress is clearly older than that. So anyway,
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, it's pretty funny. And I did like the fact you're right. They say that even the Prime Minister can't get access to UNIT, which is. Gregor said, "Is UNIT keeping an eye on her for some reason? Keep your enemies close,
Possibly.
as it were." So yeah, don't know.
Well, she's Donna's daughter.
Hmm.
So she has a bit of cred because she knows Donna and the Doctor. But still, I think if she got a job at UNIT, it'd be more like down in the filing system, putting files away rather than working in like the main hub on the top of the tower kind of thing. But anyway, again, I'm stretching for bad things to find about this
That's
episode.
right. Speaking of potential spoilers, behind the scenes video showed at least 8 skull prosthetics, so maybe Rose becomes one. Yeah, don't know. It would leave itself open for it, that's for sure. Now, I did mention this earlier. I didn't realize you were going to bring it up. The poor death of the dude. Once he went behind the TARDIS, it was like, yep, see you later. He's a red shirt, but he's not wearing red. But there you go.
Yeah, so this was in the bads. That whole sequence was amazing, but I did groan as soon as he disappeared behind the TARDIS. I'm like, well, that's it for you. And the other thing that I thought was quite unusual was when he died, the Brigadier, like Lethbridge Stewart, Kate looks at the Doctor and gives him an absolute death stare, like it's all your fault kind of thing, which I did think, that's his job and that's what he did, and she really guilts out the Doctor, and it comes back later where he's feeling really upset about it, and I did think that was unusual for her.
No, you missed the point there. So he actually said earlier, I think he said earlier on, that he tends to bring misery and death and grief everywhere, and she actually said to him, no, you actually bring joy to people's lives. And then suddenly a dude dies when he actually said to the guy, go around the corner and have a look up northwest and see what's going on. So the Doctor actually encouraged the guy to have a look around, and then of course he carks it. So her attitude is saying, oh, instead of saying, yes, you bring joy to people's lives, suddenly you bring actually death, you bring death and misery right now. And that's how I interpreted it. And I think that's what it was meant to be. So, but he did screw up, because he did tell the guy, hey, go and have a sticky beak. You're all good to go, after being told specifically, don't move around. The Doctor says, yep, go for it, sunshine. So yeah, she's within her rights to be a bit shitty about it. Losing a dude, I mean, that's a pension plan for his missus. So there you go.
He's not lost. He's in hell.
Yes, according to the voice that was coming through. So yeah.
And this was the other thing I thought was a bit unbelievable. I think it is a glass room explodes and you see shards of glass go everywhere, and then they hit the outer room and the whole room has shards and cracks all over it. But Ruby and the Doctor jump down and there's not a scratch on them.
Mate, what can I say? Just missed them by that much. I did like the fact that the bulletproof glass just got all these marks through, and I go, well, how lucky is it that you guys had that? So unbelievable. Got a first timer with a question, double outside inside. What do you guys think of the lack of costume for the Doctor? I enjoy the period pieces or situational costumes like spacesuits if it fits the setting, but the Doctor's costume has been non-existent. In other words, yes, we've brought that up before in previous episodes, and I think we both agreed it's not ideal that he doesn't have a consistent outfit. So.
And
yes.
we also talked about a lot of the Doctor's outfits looked like he's walked straight out of Country Road or some trendy shop and never ever been worn before. It is one of those things that we have talked about over a couple of episodes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're, what do you call it, a conspiracy theorist, you'd be saying, oh, they've done that for merchandising reasons. That way they can produce 50,000 different Doctors wearing different outfits. And you are right. He literally has worn these once. You are right. Wear them once and dispose of them. And I think this episode was very, very similar. So you mark this one as a bad. He's got the waterworks going again, Mr. Aaron, or at least a bit upset.
I know. It is one of those things. I do think it was a reaction. I thought it was a reaction coming off that Kate kind of gave him the death eye over losing someone. Not only has he got the waterworks, but he's punching the wall and pacing around. And it is, again, something that you might expect Eddie Murphy to do in a cop show, but not something I really see as the Doctor's character. I can remember maybe once before where the Doctor loses it, and that's because Wilf locks himself in a room and the Doctor has to sacrifice himself and regenerate because the old man did something stupid. Not to this level of emotion have we seen in the Doctor before. We've talked about, just about in every episode he's cried or lost it or done something, and I don't like that in Doctor Who because it doesn't say I'm the smartest person, I'm an aloof 2,000-year-old alien kind of thing. It's more human failings that he shows.
There's two things to take out of that, though. I really liked it actually because it shows frustration, right? And
Yeah,
if you are the smartest person in the room and you're being beaten by something else, it will irk you. And I do think the fact that someone died on his watch and it was his fault is playing on him. So, because I don't know in the history of Doctor Who how many deaths are occurred because of his hand specifically, and it was effectively his fault. So I really like
yeah,
that. But why it worked is who's he with? Mel says stop grizzling. And
yeah,
I thought, well done, smack the guy around, get him out of his rut, and we've got shit to do. Let's get up and do it.
mm,
So
yeah,
I like the idea that he got to release a bit of emotion because up until this point, he's just had an easy run of it throughout all these episodes, and now
yeah,
he's being pushed to the brink, to the absolute. It's a real test, and he had to sort of just release it. But as I said, it allowed Mel to just instead of going, oh, sob, 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 just say, nah, enough of the being the crybaby. Let's get on with it. So I really liked it.
yeah,
I thought it was actually quite good, even if it is out of character. So yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Sutek in his various guises. So it didn't work for you, Mr. Aaron.
Well, it's one of those I'm on the fence because if you Sutek appeared in Pyramids of Mars, sort of looking different ways. And if you look at the paper mache mask in the center of the jackal, and then the one with the green eyes and the dog, it really, even in the 70s, that was a bit hokey. That was not the best special effects or masks in Doctor Who. So I would say the CGI version of the jackal is way better than the static masks we had in the 70s. But the iconic look of Sutek the Osiran sitting in that Egyptian style mask, I think is better than the CGI jackal they did. And if the TARDIS had faded away and it had been Sutek sitting there on his throne in the original costume, I don't think modern audiences would have thought that looked crap. I actually really like the original design. So I'm always of the opinion if you can't do something better than the original, there's no reason to change it for the sake of it. So yes, probably the jackal being CGI and being able to move around and look real was good. It wasn't the best special effect ever. It wasn't bad, but I do like the original Sutek the best.
Yeah, even with Disney's massive budget, they couldn't make it look photorealistic. And I thought at the time, oh yeah, some audience is going to really struggle to swallow this. It did look pretty poor, and we've seen in different TV shows where CG organic beings can look really like photorealistic, and you go, how the hell they do that? And clearly in
Yeah,
this one, it just looked digital. I mean, they obviously didn't have the budget to try and do it practically, build an actual large thing and get it to stand and move the arms or whatever, and then accentuate it with CGI. But to do it straight with digital work kind of lost some of the impact. And mate, I agree with you. If they had to use the one that we saw on the right hand side, somehow integrated that, the fans would have gone, "Hey, that's grouse," because we've seen that before, and maybe it may have just sold the audience a bit more. But yeah, the CG one was like, oh, duh. That's a key
yeah,
moment. It needs to just work, and it kind of didn't. So yeah,
yeah.
not to worry.
And the other thing, I'm not going to read all of this. This was an exposition heavy episode of Doctor Who. There was a lot of plot explained in dialogue between different people. And I'm always of the opinion, if you can show something, it's better than telling it. I do totally understand in this case they needed to say it. But the dialogue I thought was really good. I think there were some actually classic speeches in this episode of Doctor Who. But again, for people who don't like talky episodes and find like the more dialogue laden episodes a bit boring, this was one that had a lot of stuff stuffed into it.
Yeah, I get that. That's why I think it definitely requires a couple of viewings. So after the first night, I go, "Oh, that was really good," but it's like, okay, I've really lost a lot of stuff. I've got to pay attention, and that's actually a good thing because you're not watching it again to say, "Well, all right, or maybe it'll get better on the second viewing." It already is pretty good. It's just you're trying to
Yeah.
pick up bits that you missed, and I think that's actually quite important and kind of worked for me. So yeah, I had no issue with it at all. Guess what, fans? That's the end of the bads. So we've done the goods, we've done the bads. Now we've got the uglies. Now, the uglies, for those who don't know, is more about just questions that we want to bring up and things that we want to look at. Doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the episode. And we're going to kick this off with a bit of the beast, mate.
So Ruby's mum says, I know what that is. That's the beast. And the beast has been in Doctor Who before in the Satan pit. And it's one of the biggest monsters ever. You can see in the bottom right corner there's a little tiny doctor standing in front of this massive beast, which is basically Satan in chains. And in that episode, they say the beast is Set, Satan, Sados, and they're all names for Sutek. But the really interesting thing about this is The only other time they got Gabriel Worf, who does the voice of Sutek, to come back, he was the voice of the Beast in this episode. And I am wondering, in this episode, the Beast was in chains and kept in place under a black hole with two vases in front of him. I am wondering if we've actually seen the resolution to this story where the Doctor traps Sutek as the Beast on a planet under a black hole, and this is actually a prequel to the Satan Pit, because in that they didn't know who he was, they didn't know where he came from and how he got there. And that would be a really mind-bending way of wrapping up that story and pulling the continuity all together. I wouldn't say they would, except for the one thing where they deliberately got Gabriel Worf to come in and voice the Beast in that episode.
As soon as you said it's the Beast, I just had sorry, it's just the way my mind works. I was thinking of the Beast from The Chaser, you know, the big guy who does all the answers. I thought you should have had a picture of him there. Is it the Beast? Anyway, sorry.
I wish I had. I didn't even think of that. I wish I had.
It's the Beast. Absolutely fantastic. Now, you obviously did like the fact that Susan Triad was channeling her inner Theresa May.
Now, I don't know if you remember this, but as soon as I saw it, I remembered it. Do you remember when Theresa May came out to Dancing Queen and did exactly the same dance as Susan Triad did? They were obviously lampooning her. I thought that was quite clever, actually. I didn't hate it. I had to laugh, but I brought it up because I don't know how many of the audience would have actually picked it up.
See, what was good is that Susan was actually saying that, you know, the canned audience applause was too much, and this was too much, and that was too much. So even she's trying to tone it all down. Now, in real life, for the Theresa May thing, I don't know what happened there. If there was a huge crowd, I assume there was. But I like that with the Susan thing, saying, yeah, it's getting a little bit out of control, a little bit silly. So, and of course, a lot of these things are a bit like that. So she's performing to a non-existent audience. And you are right. It's clearly representing what Theresa May had done. So, it was very, very clever and very, very good. And it just goes to show an element of the humility of the character when she says, you know, I don't need all this extra fluff. It's a bit unnecessary. But, you know, it kind of worked for the story, which was particularly cool. But storm's coming there. There's a storm coming, Annie. What's the deal with this?
Well, it is a sci-fi trope. I didn't put that one in. I did put the one from Terminator, because the end of Terminator, there's a storm coming as well. I'd be very careful, Mrs. Sunday, talking to Ruby's grandmother, and this is the one time where I've had them breaking the fourth wall and I haven't put it in the bad, because it's happened so many times this season. It was kind of distracting. But when she looks directly at the audience and says, I'd be very careful, there's a storm coming, I'm like, okay, she is a really important character. And this is what I discussed before: a storm, rain, the Rani, possibly, and then again the Time Lords changed the Second Doctor without him being in, you know, danger of his life to hide him away. So maybe there's something to all of that. We don't know.
Well, don't forget, because we actually do see a storm clouds coming in, and I actually thought, oh, maybe it'll rain at some point in the episode. We didn't get to that point. So it'd be curious to see if next week that actually occurs and the whole city's blanketed in darkness or whatever. But that, I mean, physically we see something occurring, but we don't actually see what the resolution of that is. So watch this space, I guess. But getting back to the Flood character, the fact that from the Christmas special to now, that's a really nice link. That was like, you know, something that was just an offhanded joke way back when is now suddenly a bit of a big deal. Now that's one to watch, that's for sure. So very cool.
Yeah. The other thing that I find, and this goes into, are they in a different dimension in the land of fiction? The Doctor says to Ruby, now I have to warn you, and this would mean nothing to Ruby, I'm pretty sure. He says that time has tides and has hollows. So if the Doctor says that to Ruby, what would that actually mean to her? It wouldn't really mean anything. Time has tides and hollows. But what it says to me as an audience member is, again, when they're talking about rupturing canon, there is a Doctor Who comic called The Tides of Time, and there's a Doctor Who missing story called The Hollows of Time. And neither of them are actual Doctor Who episodes. They're part of Doctor Who's, I guess, non-canonical sort of stories. And I do wonder if, you know, all this thing we've looked over this whole season about certain words having importance, and talking about this one, they talked about Dickens, they talked about Dickensian, and so writers and stuff. I am wondering if after Sutek, there's another story on top of this that they're loading up for next year that has to do with the land of fiction. I don't know, It is really weird that they started this run back with Star Beast, which was a Doctor Who comic. So they've actually pulled something that was a Doctor Who comic and they made a Doctor Who episode out of it, which is really unusual. And then they've talked about other Doctor Who comics and audios and things like that. So if you put up the next slide, I don't know if I talk about it again. Oh, no. So I did talk. I did think there was other stuff like last week with Richard E. Grant. He was from a spin-off radio sort of audio podcast, and he was also in a Children in Need special. And I am wondering if all the different non-canonical Doctor Who adventures are being pulled in for some reason. I don't know why they keep doing that, but I would be very surprised if there wasn't something to it, because there's just been too many mentions through the whole season now.
I did like the fact that when the Doctor's trying to explain it, albeit offhandedly, about the time and the tides and whatever else, clearly Ruby's not going to get it because it's way beyond the comprehension, effectively, of a human being. And I think that's a bit of a big deal. And I did like the fact, and I forgot to mention it, when she was in the time tunnel earlier on, the time room, talking to the mother, saying how her life has changed and she's now traveled the universe and all the rest. That was fantastic. That is such a cool thing to say, this is where I started from, where you left me, and this is where I've become. And if you got the opportunity to say that to anybody, that's a bit of a big deal. And I actually found that to be a really, really good moment. I know it was earlier on, but I just wanted to mention it because I just thought of it. So, very, very cool.
And this is another interesting thing. Sutekh mentions, the Harbinger of Sutekh mentions he was hiding in the Howling Void. Now, we have seen the Howling Void before. And what was hiding in the Howling Void? It was the Dalek Void ship. And that was how they evaded the Time War and survived after the Time Lords had been destroyed. And so to bring back the Howling Void and talk about that, I am wondering, the Daleks are going to turn up eventually. And I'm linking that into I lost my family to the most terrible things. Mel says that to Ruby's mum when she's saying to trust the Doctor. And we have never seen any of Mel's background. And I am wondering if this is going to be she lost her family to the Daleks or something like that. Again, I'm just pulling together different things that are said in the line, but the Daleks tend to turn up once a series or every couple of years. And so to set that up, even if it's just some background information, it could happen.
See, the thing I'm not sure of is they're presenting Sutekh as being a really nasty pasty, right? He effectively touches the dude, and the guy just vanishes into dust and whatever else. And with that in mind, we don't really know where this is going to go, right? Susan's turned into a thing, and you got the thing on top of the TARDIS. I don't know what else to call it. And it's really like we don't know where this is going and what's going to happen next and how dark it's going to be. If the Daleks were introduced at some point, what happens then is everybody goes completely apeshit and goes, oh my God, the Daleks are in the show. And Sutekh just gets pushed out to the side, right? Forget him. We've got the cool dudes in town. So I would say don't do that. Don't introduce them at all. Maybe down the track next season or whatever else. But for this, the focus has to be on Sutekh. And even if you're dropping characters, say, oh, they could pop up, that's the worst thing you want, because then your audience is just lost. So go for it, dude.
Yeah, that's what I'm actually saying. I don't think they're going to turn up next episode or anything. I think it's just very early groundwork being laid into the story that Mel might have a relationship with them sometime next season or something.
Yep, fair enough. She also said she returned to Earth finally to face her past.
So, yeah, that was in another episode. So Mel is a bit of an enigma, which doesn't happen much with Doctor Who companions.
Okay, very, very cool.
Now, this is another really interesting one. So some people pointed out maybe it might be Sutekh from one of the very first publicity photos they released of the Doctor, maybe almost 6 months ago. You see the one at the top where the Doctor is behind this multicolored coming through a multicolored time tunnel. Well, the one you're pointing at is from Pyramids of Mars, and the one to the left of that is the publicity picture that the Doctor, that the BBC released. And people straight away goes, oh, it's Sutekh, because of the colors. That's how obsessed people are with that show. And underneath that, there's a couple of pictures from when the Doctor split, where he did the bioregeneration, and where also the TARDIS split in two. And I am wondering if when they split the TARDIS in two, that is what released Sutekh. But here's something interesting. yesterday or today, the BBC released another publicity photo of the Doctor, and it's that one on the right where he kind of has three different aspects of himself. He has the red one, the normal one, and the blue one. And I'm wondering if they're putting hints in the publicity, because I think I said last week there's three different versions of the sonic screwdriver. There's a red one, there's a blue one, and there's a yellow one. And I am wondering if we're watching different aspects of the Doctor, and this is why we've been, talking about alternate timelines and the canon is ruptured, and how come the Doctor's personality is so different from episode to episode, where maybe we're watching different timelines. And I do wonder if this series will end with Sutekh being sealed away because the TARDISes have to go back together, and David Tennant has to merge back with Ncuti's version of the Doctor to stabilize his personality because the timelines have been split and ruptured.
That's a lot to shove into one episode, though, dude.
It is
a lot, right?
It's
and especially
good news, Dags. It's an hour episode instead of 45 minutes next week.
Oh, that kind of helps. It would be interesting if that, because that's a lot to sort of shove in, and that'd be a lot for an audience to process. And you do wonder if the people, and like as we said, like the past few weeks, this is listed as season 1 because it's the first season that's on Disney, and the idea being that Disney are trying to bring in whole new people to watch the show who've never seen it before, right? So some of it, as we've said, is a little bit of Time Lord 101 throughout the entire season. This is one of the first episodes, if not the first, which is dealing with a lot more of the past. Now, there could be potential first-time viewers who are watching this going, oh, it's just a new bad guy, right? Done. But all the shit that's going to occur next week, if it occurs with Tennant coming back and different TARDISes and whatever else, that could actually alienate the new audience that they've just brought on board this season, going, well, I've loved this show. Now I'm completely confused as to what's going on. Why are there two of them? So I think if they could finish on a high like that, it could probably just be an absolute ratings juggernaut. But are they that clever to think of something like that? What do you think?
I don't know. Like, we've had a lot of speculation. I don't know if our stuff is likely to happen or they'll do something totally different. The one thing I'm disappointed about is could lead to disappointment. Russell T Davies, over his time as showrunner before, wrote much better lead ups to the climax, and a lot of the climaxes actually let people down. Now, they're still good, but often didn't live up to the potential of part 1. So fingers crossed this is going to land properly and be as good as the first episode.
Regarding the 3 pictures of the Doctors, I like that. You got the fun docky, the smart docky, and the sooky docky. Look, I'm with you. I mean, this episode was like a bit of like an absolute ripper, and you go, well, geez, I hope they can maintain the quality for next week. You'll know before the intro credits next week as to whether it's going to be a good one or not. So, yeah, part of me's thinking what you're suggesting sounds great and wonderful, but it's questionable whether it's in the too hard basket or whether you go, mate, you are so far off the track, it's not funny. But we shall see. Regarding this particular speech, Mr. Aaron, I know some of it's covered by the logo, but
I won't read the whole thing, but I thought this was amazing because it sets up first, when you were reading it, it set up the toy maker and the maestro and stuff we've seen, and then the trickster and the Mara, and it name checked a whole lot of old Doctor Who villains and kind of put them in the order of their, I guess, godhood. And then it listed gods that we haven't ever seen in Doctor Who before, and it listed gods that we might have seen but not known them for what they are. And then, of course, it lists the head of all of these gods, and it's the one true name for forevermore is Sutekh. And we did set up in the Toymaker episode that the one that waited was the one person that the Toymaker wouldn't go and play games with, and I think we've discovered the answer to that. It was Sutekh. The Toymaker will go and play games with anyone, and gods and monsters and the Master and Time Lord, but even the Toymaker won't mess with Sutekh. So I did think that was one of the better speeches in Doctor Who, leading into one of the better cliffhangers, but it also gives room for expansion if they want, because it name checks a lot of other things we haven't seen.
Yeah, I picked up on that, which is kind of cool. Now, I'm going to show you something very, very quickly. So Double Insider said kind of gives the impression they might go a bit crazy with this season finale. And even though Double Insider is the first time this person's joined us, you have a reason to hate this person because clearly they're in England. Not sure if it's worth mentioning. We have mentioned this about the showing the finale in the theatres in the UK. And you were going to see it. Oh, dude,
Yeah.
in Australia, we don't get shit like that here. I was like, how
No,
lucky is that? So, yeah, you
the
need a
last
TARDIS, Aaron, so you can trade places with double inside there.
Yeah, the last theatre screening we got was The Woman That Fell to Earth, and we haven't had one since. And I really was crossing my fingers this would be at the cinema, but it's not. So I just get to watch it on Disney Plus like everybody else, except for you guys.
And the worst part is at Aaron's place, he's got a 23-inch black and white television. So Greg has said he's just annoyed that no one will play games with him. Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Yes.
So we've got a couple of conspiracy theories that Aaron's drawn up. So I love the sort of like his brain is just going completely Burko on all this material. So what have you got there, Mr. Aaron?
So the timelines in canon are rupturing. Now, I don't know if you saw the Harbinger. She was wearing like a green suit. You can see there she's got the green waistcoat on kind of thing. But you know what she hasn't got? The suit hasn't got green sleeves. Now, what does green sleeves usually herald?
I would never forget a song as far as I'm concerned. I've got no idea.
So green sleeves usually heralds the arrival of Mr. Whippy because they always use green sleeves in the Mr. Whippy van. And I am thinking that Sutek is actually the god of ice cream, and he is going to bring the Sutek's gift of soft serve to everyone next week. And you can see Sue soft serve up in the top corner there as a soft serve ice cream. You're not going.
I thought there was something serious. I go, green sleeves, that's a tune. And I what? You have clearly been smoking the wacky tobacco. Fans, you heard it here first. Aaron is officially losing it. And that's not the end of it because he's got another one. And this is to do with the golden ticket.
Well, this is more serious. We have talked about Willy Wonka being a theme this series before, from the boat that looked like the Wonka boat and things like that. But there was so many different things in this episode. What did you need to get into unit? A golden security pass, a golden ticket. Now, Ruby, Cherry Sunday, Ruby's grandma, you've only ever seen her in bed. She's bedridden. What are the only other characters that you can think of that are bedridden the whole time you see them? It's Charlie's grandparents. And you know who units. Sorry, I can't do it without cracking up. Do you know who unit's scientific advisor is now? A freaking Oompa Loompa.
Mate, you know how you string long bows, right? I mean, there are bows that this was like they can barely maintain their structural integrity. Is like, where are you going with it? Sutek is the master of ice cream, and you need a Wonka's golden ticket to get into unit. Friggin' hell, you've been spending way too much time watching this shit, I tell you what. Oh, well, my God.
I do wonder if it is to do with literature. The theme of this series has been a lot of literature, so I don't know.
Two things. Who gives Aaron the wacky tobacco? And you know what the worst part will be? Somebody will watch that on replay and go, hey, he's really onto something there. He's not onto anything. Everybody's just making it up as he went along. He's gone a bit radio rental, spending too much time in the shop. Guess what? That's the end of all of our pictures. It's now time to rate in Rotten Time Lords this particular episode, Mr. Aaron, the old Legend of Ruby Sunday. How good is that? So how do you rate this episode, man?
Look, I'm going to give it 100% fresh, not rotten at all.
Yeah, we haven't got a 0, so we have to put one master in there. So, yes, I tend to agree with you, which obviously means, for those who are interested, that this particular episode is 100% crinoid fresh. You know what? I got to say, I was, after last week's debacle, I was very impressed. I mean, I got into the store, you guys were talking about it, and they said it was the greatest thing. So for those who don't know, when I was at the store, Aaron came in. I said, how was the episode? He said it was fantastic, right? And I thought, okay, that's a good omen. But I watched it with my other half, and I got to admit, I was like really captivated by it, like really drawn in. And there were some emotional bits there, and I was like, bits of shit, what's going on here? And I think it's clearly by far the best episode of the season of this particular series. Like blows everything else out of the water, right? And I don't think there's any moments in it where you can say that's a fast forward, that's a weak moment. All of it is strong. And where there are moments where there's not much happening, there's interesting dialogue going on. And I found the whole thing to be captivating. And when I watched it again today, I was really drawn into it. And I thought, you know what? If the rest of the series had been like this, I tell you what, it's like the rest of Doctor Who doesn't exist. This is just spectacular, but unfortunately, that's not the case. So yeah, all power to them. They've done really well. Next week, though, we have to wait and see.
So, yep, just hoping that next week maintains this sort of high standard benchmark. I would be very happy if it does.
Totally agree. If Space Babies didn't exist and wasn't shown, and this was the quality of the season, would have got a lot better than 2.2 million. I totally agree. The downs are very down. Space Babies and even Rogue from last week were definitely there were massive downers, which is really unfortunate because it could have actually been good quality the whole way through. I mean, the series itself has copped a lot of criticism from a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, and you're thinking, well. And some of that has been due to the concept of the stories and the writing and maybe some of the performances. But if it had been consistent the whole way through and just a high level where it wasn't pushing certain agendas, and we've discussed this previously, and it was just all about good quality storytelling with a brand new Doctor and a brand new companion, it would have just kicked ass big time and we'd be celebrating fantastic amounts of goods. But unfortunately, that wasn't to be, as I mentioned earlier. So
I kind of think it would have been much more lauded a series if they'd taken out Space Babies and Rogue and it had been a 6-episode season.
There is definitely that. I totally agree with you. So, yes, we have a Mark Smith here. The message. I don't know what that is, dude, but yes.
Yeah, it's the woke. It's the woke agenda. It's the woke
okay,
message.
yeah. So, but I agree. Yeah, take those 2 episodes out, make it 6 episodes, and it would have been really, really good because the others were actually quite enjoyable. But yeah, this one, spectacular. I really was very, very impressed. So, very good. Is there any final words you want to mention about this episode before we move on, Mr. Aaron, considering next week is the final episode? Oh, now, before we go any further, is there another one coming out? I heard rumors that there was a 9th episode floating around. Can you just fill me in about that?
There's a Tales from the TARDIS, which is basically Ruby and the Doctor talking about Pyramids of Mars and then them showing Pyramids of Mars for people who want to watch that, sort of catch up on who Sutekh is. The next one after this will be the Christmas special at the end of the year.
Okay, cool. No worries. So next week is actually the last episode, which should be very, very cool. So we're about to finish up. So don't forget, if you haven't done so already, of course, be sure to check out the Sci-Fi Zone socials. There's stuff coming out all the time on YouTube and whatever else. And of course, for all your Docky Who needs, including talking about the series, mate, Aaron's Collectibles is the place to go, Mr. Aaron.
I do have to say it's been really enjoyable. Everyone coming in and being positive about the show. The last week, that's one of the reasons I've got to rate it higher than I probably would have given it a 9, but I've given it a 10 because it's actually enjoyable to be a Doctor Who fan and talking about the series and seeing everyone happy with it for a change.
So that actually brings up a good point because I've been in the store when fans have come in, and look, for those who don't know, Aaron's store is a bit of a mecca for Doctor Who fans. And when people do come in and they all want to talk about the series and they're speaking about it on a positive note, you can say, well, if I personally have an issue with this episode, maybe it's just me. But if all these people are saying exactly the same thing, well, clearly it's not me, it's the episode. So you are right. When something good has been released, and this episode was a good example of that, and people are coming in and they're going, the gosh, and they go, this is awesome, this is fantastic, then you know it's won over the audience. And for that reason, it is actually worth all the accolades that it's getting, which is very, very cool. So, but will it maintain it next week, Mr. Aaron? That's the question you've got to ask yourself.
Fingers crossed, but that's why we certified it crinoid fresh.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, anyway, we're going to buzz off. Thanks for sticking with us. I know we ran over time. Next week, we'll probably end up doing the same thing again, depending on how the episode goes. All good, all groovy. The Legend of Ruby Sunday. We'll see you next Tuesday. There you go. Well, goodbye, Ruby Tuesday. All right. See you, Mr. Aaron. I'll catch you very, very soon. Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Have a good one, guys. See you.